Welcome, everybody, to UNnormalized Podcast with your host, Frankie A. I am back from vacation and back at the podcast game, and I am joined today with a very exciting guest, something that means a lot to me. Politics is something that I think we need to have discussion about. And here at UNnormalized Podcast, there is going to be a segment called the UNN, which is basically my take on what's going on in the news cycle today and everything that has to do with what's going on in the news. So I can't have a UNN segment without having this gentleman on, AJ Stewart, who is somebody that I met through doing some local. I've always been involved in local politics in the area that I grew up in. So I met AJ through a mutual friend who I wanted to kind of get back into some stuff surrounding local politics when I moved out of the area. And I was introduced to this guy, and he is a genius when it comes to things surrounding campaigns and breaking down things in politics. So welcome, everybody, AJ Stewart to UNnormalized Podcast. AJ, welcome.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing
back from vacation.
Yes, very nice and relaxing. And then I walk into, a couple of days into this crazy, hectic news cycle that we have going on right now. But AJ, why don't you tell them a little bit about how you and I kind of bumped into each other and met through this whole thing?
Of course. So we met kind of how I would love to meet everyone. A volunteer who's willing to get involved in a campaign and do what's ever needed. Campaigns, big or small, if they have a huge budget or if they have a small budget, volunteers are the lifeblood. They're the ones that are in it for the candidate, the cause, a lot of things that the campaign stands behind. And it's super important that those volunteers, they're day one and they're there the last day as well. So we met obviously on a local where it was not a heavily funded campaign. And you came in, you did the great job of really helping facilitate more volunteers. You grew up with a lot of those people, so it was really good to have you on the ground. Being able to, talk the talk and walk the walk and be willing to go out when it was dark and cold and stay out there when it was bright and hot. So, again, if I could meet more people like you at that opportunity, I know campaigns would be better off.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And I have to say I've worked in some local campaigns in that same area in the past, and there was like an excitement and an energy that you guys brought to the town in general. I think it was only because of what you guys were bringing or what you were bringing and structuring and kind of like the brain behind it all, because of the fact that I think it gave a new shape to politics on the local level in the Newark area. And so it was just an exciting part to, I felt the buzz even from all the way down in Point Pleasant Beach. It was just something that I wanted to be part of. Yeah, I did know the candidate pretty much my whole entire life. So that was one reason why I wanted to get involved too. Changing career paths into stuff that, maybe wrapped around politics someday. But then when our mutual friend said, you have to meet this guy, AJ, after I met you, after our initial conversation, I was just like totally excited about the whole thing. It was a great experience. I enjoyed putting the time and effort out. I enjoyed wrapping anybody that I knew into it because I knew that it was being led by somebody who knew what they were doing, who was on their A game. So it was definitely a great experience. I mean, from all the, from the telephone calls, from going out and hitting the pavement and all that kind of stuff, you guys really made it like exciting for people. It wasn't, like I said, I've done other campaign stuff where, they just send volunteers out. This, you guys brought an excitement to it. So is that something that led you, that kind of excitement? What brought you into this whole, what made AJ get into, and that's what we do here at the UNnormalized Podcast, is we talk about, we have people come on that don't have like a normalized experience with things. So this is a field that not your everyday person gets into. Something that maybe we do need younger people like yourself who have a grasp on politics and how it works and the machine behind it. But what made AJ get into politics?
So it's kind of a two-pronged story there. This is something I was born into. I was like 9 years old, walking doors with my mom on her first town council campaign, seeing what it was like, what I literally do now. I was doing that long ago. But again, not something I've done forever. Prior to, 4 years ago, right before the presidential election, I was managing retail stores in Manhattan. Wow. I had pretty much your typical corporate, job, with all the, bells and whistles that go along with that. And going into the presidential, it was, that summer, I realized what I was doing wasn't what I was meant for. I look back on, I was always into politics. I always, paid attention to what was going on nationally, locally. My mom never stopped being involved. So, I just decided to make this complete career change, go from somewhere where I was, doing my job, making my steps, working up, to completely something different, which is community organizing and field organizing and being a political operative. Realizing that I have a specific set of skills. I sound like Liam Neeson right now. That in being able to manage people, but also having that knowledge that policy and those who are elected, even at the lowest levels, even our school board, and I'm not saying school board is the lowest level, but the county committee races, the school board races, the local mayor and council races, how much those really affect our day-to-day lives. Coupled with what I learned with almost 10 years of retail management experience, kind of put me in this, like you said, unnormalized path to being a political operative. And I can't say the guests that I've had on so far, that's been like a common thread is, people have started out on a specific career path and something changes, the wind changes and shifts, and people realize that they have a calling to do something so totally different. And it's refreshing when you meet people who kind of listen to that inner voice that's telling them that, you're destined for something else. And most people kind of will take the easier, softer route, and, leave it at that. But it's very commendable, I think, when people get that inner voice to tell them that they're, pursue your passions, pursue your dreams, because it's easier just to follow the quote unquote normal path, do the whole, I come from a background in retail myself. So it's easy just to stay on that path. And what I like about your story, is that you felt that change needed to happen. You felt so strongly about, what was going on at the time before the presidential, that you couldn't stay in retail, that you had to make that change, because you needed to be part of change, which, for
somebody like myself who does like a lot of legislative advocacy stuff, it's important to have young voices out there, and not only in the forefront but in the background as well, leading the charge. And I know what I was always told when I was getting into stuff like politics, because it was like always like something that I was interested in. Just like you said, like it's the local elections that make a lot of change. That a lot of change can come from in a community, and I saw that basically from a school board election. That's how I got involved in a lot of politics and policy stuff that I am involved in. By all means, I am not any type of expert or anything like that. Like, but it's where I found like an interest. I said, hey, there's like an energy around that, and if I'm gonna do advocacy work, you have to be part of kind of like all come at it from all angles. So it's not just policy stuff and going to, you know, your local senators and all that kind of stuff, and to the state house and to Congress and all that. You have to kind of get all these pieces involved. So it's awesome that we have you behind the scenes, and especially in a climate like, you know, like it is today. So tell us a little bit about some of your experiences. So we know that you went from retail and made the shift into being an operative. Tell us what does an operative do? What is that? Because it sounds like you're like you're like a fucking
007.
Like, yeah, it does. It's a pretty badass like job title.
So first of all, it's less tuxedos and more cargo shorts. No, but you know, an operative. So it's kind of funny. It's kind of a term that we use, and it's used for us because we wear so many hats. You know, operative. You're having political conversations. You know, no one. You know, it's hard to beat the machine. In some way, you know, when somebody's running, unless they're a super popular independent candidate, and by independent I don't mean political party, I mean an independent person, independent of power brokers or anything like that. So everybody needs a little help. So having those political conversations, and by political I don't mean Democrat against Republican, I mean people asking for support. You know, when you ask for support, you're asking somebody to put their name on the line for you. So, you know, that's one side of the operative world, or the word. You know, and also as you become a campaign veteran, so you work on a campaign, you know, maybe you're a canvasser or a volunteer, maybe you're writing the op-eds. There's points of the campaign. There's communications. So you're working, you know, someone's social media page, maybe their PR page, their Facebook page, their letters to the editor, you know, communications, how they're communicating. You're helping them with their literature or their lit. I may refer to literature, lit. This is if they go synonymous. But you may also be helping with their, their messaging. You've got fundraising. That's a huge point. Fundraising, you know, makes the whole campaign happen. Obviously, you want to rely on volunteers because they're the lifeblood of the campaign, but things cost money. Mailers cost money.
Sure.
Paid canvas costs money. And then there's the field aspect of it. You know, it's the people. And again, my boss will love to hear this, but field is the most important part of the campaign because it's having conversations with voters. It's having face-to-face or word-to-word conversations, hearing what they care about, and actually listening to what they have to say, and also giving them, you know, what the candidate stands for. Obviously, local races, you know, a city like Newark, which is broken down into several wards and is a large city in the state of New Jersey. You know, each candidate has 20 to 30,000 people they need to speak to. There's no way a candidate can speak to all those people.
Yeah, so you're like the voice. You're like the face for them.
Exactly. And the field team, you know, they can, you know, these are numbers that everybody can look up. They can control. They can't win an election for you. They can't lose an election for you. But if it's a close election, field is what wins or loses an election. And you'll see campaigns, especially in incumbents, who kind of rest on their laurels and they don't do that side of it.
Yeah.
You know, that you think their name being out there is all that matters.
Yeah.
But anybody who's an up and coming politician, an up and coming elected official, you have to talk to people. And I truly believe that doesn't stop after you get sworn in. That's, you know, you start it, you know, in an election, you start it in February and your election's in November, and you don't stop. You never stop. You're always running again because those people that voted for you still care what you have to say, and you should still care what they have to say.
Yeah,
so,
and I can testify to that because when I was doing the face-to-face and ringing of the doorbells and talking to people, it can be pretty intense because everyone's doors that you're ringing or knocking on is not going for the party. So, or for the person who's running that you're working in the field for. So it's having a conversation and knowing that candidate and knowing what their views are, what their platforms are. So you can have a dialogue and a conversation with people, even if they're not voting for them, but to bring that information back to you guys and give you that information so you can do whatever you guys do with that to make it beneficial for the candidate. So it was definitely very interesting. It's something you definitely have to be on your toes for because you never know who's going to answer that door and what type of feedback you're going to get. But yeah, so I totally remember that from doing the campaign about people just, you know, some people love the candidate and some people did not. But, you know, if you can kind of tap into them and see if they can at least have an option to or a small like seed of hope for them to like change their mind.
Of course.
I think, you know, and that came from you guys teaching us, the field workers going out there, how to do that, how to spin it from being I don't want to vote for this candidate to let me think about it, or why don't you have him come out here and talk to me. So it was definitely very, very interesting. And you brought up the machine. Like, I think that's a big part of it is that people don't look at it like it is a machine. And it's only those people who kind of maybe work behind the scenes about it, you know, with it a little bit, can see that there are a lot of moving parts to this whole thing. Like, I can't tell you guys, like, I would walk into the campaign office and it would be like operation like zero, like, you know, it would be like this whole big setup, boards and you know, different districts and maps and strategies from the different districts. Like AJ was talking about, the city of Newark where we were working is broken down into several wards have multiple districts in it, and each district is campaign for that district, and a block-to-block situation. So it is definitely a lot of strategy that goes behind all of this stuff. What other, besides the campaign that I know that you and I worked on, are there any like other campaigns that we would kind of like know about, or our listeners would maybe have heard about that you can talk about? I know that talking about people who you're currently working with, you know, we want to kind of stay away from that, but who are some of the people that you can talk about?
Oh, of course. Well, I guess obviously for your Jersey listeners, probably the biggest and most important campaign I've worked on in the state of New Jersey was Phil Murphy, our current governor, both his primary race and then his subsequent gubernatorial race. You know, that was crazy. It's 21 counties. New Jersey is a small in area, but huge in population. So that's probably the most prolific race I've worked on, where you know, you get to see this whole machine, and you see it all working in every piece, how it works with each other. But that was 2017. So that was coming off of the current occupant of the White House. His electoral college win, where in a state where that went for Hillary Clinton. So we were, you know, We had the primary, which, you know, a lot of pundits will say was the true election, because, you know, New Jersey and it was a perfect storm for a Democratic governor. We were coming off of Christie, who, while in his first term was a very popular governor, post Bridgegate and his subsequent leaving of the state to run for president, and then following his close ties with the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Ave, it really made a interesting political battleground for New Jersey. So the primary was a lot, there was a lot more focus. So that was where the real fight went. And in a lot of ways, that fight was decided even before anybody could vote. We had 3 great candidates that were spoken about none before anybody had announced. In the back of the mind, it was Steve Fulop, mayor of Jersey City, Steve Sweeney,
Senate president.
Yes, and controller of the South Jersey. And then everybody, and the third choice was Phil Murphy. So it was a tale of 2 Steves and then Phil. So there was a political, that's where the politics really came in, because, New Jersey is a state divided north and south, and you had, you obviously are in the south, in the north, and there's political allegiances to certain party bosses, and the great thing about the Murphy campaign was they didn't go to anybody. They didn't go to one specific power broker. They decided it was 21 counties. They got the endorsement. Phil got the endorsement from all 21 county chairs. And when you think about that and think about the amount of work that went into that, because he wasn't an elected official. He was a guy who had a good vision for New Jersey. Maybe he didn't, as an elected official, he didn't carry the baggage that some did, but he was this, kind of beacon of hope. He was everybody's second choice.
Yeah.
And as the tale of 2 Steves kind of played out, neither Mayor Fulop or Senator Sweeney decided to run, which made it not, I want to say easier, but it made it a different landscape. Yeah. We had John Wisniewski, former state senator, who was, battled every day. He kind of, he took endorsements and kind of took the Bernie route as we were having the political fallout from the national side. I was working in Central Jersey. It does exist, by the way. Central Jersey does exist.
What is Central Jersey? I don't know what that is.
I like to say that's Monmouth, that's Union, that's Middlesex, Camden, as you go towards Philly. But I do believe Central Jersey does exist. I probably have now pissed off anybody
from Central Jersey.
No, or North and South who don't agree it doesn't happen. No, Central Jersey does believe they do exist. But I did work on, campaigns and the Murphy campaign in Union and Middlesex County in general. Okay. And I could not believe, in the primary, obviously and again, like I said, it was a very, very positive and very interesting political environment, because 2016 has now changed the game.
Everything.
And people are getting involved that were never involved before.
So AJ, you had mentioned something that kind of like sparked into my mind. You said with Phil Murphy, like he was not like really a politician before. So having the occupant in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, it seems like that's a trend. Is that something that, in your experiences, is that something that voters are turning towards because they're so disingenuous about the professional politician out there? And you also had mentioned about when we were campaigning and when somebody campaigns, it doesn't stop there. It's not just about the name. You have to kind of work the machine. That's probably why we have who we have in the Oval Office right now, is because Hillary kind of like was running on the name brand, the name, the Clinton name. Is that something that we're going to be seeing a lot more of, that the career politician is no longer always going to be like the top dog in campaigns? Or is this going to be something that you feel like shies people away now from voting from someone who doesn't have some type of political professionalism or career behind them?
So I to be honest, 45 has been an anomaly. You look at the current the current presidential nominees, candidates that are running for the nomination for the Democratic Party. The front runners are all senators. We've got Mayor Pete out there, who love Pete. He is the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, large city. He's got an extensive resume, and he's got the executive experience. You see there are a few outliers. Andy Yang, and a few of them who are not career politicians, but they're polling very low. It looks like the Democratic Party is going to nominate what you call a career politician, or I like to say career public servant.
Gotcha.
Because remember, like I said in the beginning, as an elected official, you don't stop campaigning. You never stop campaigning. My hope, and obviously I've only made it to the gubernatorial level. I've not really worked on Senate or congressional races, because it's always been, this is a career for me. Other campaign staff, they work, that ends up being a side job. But I really do believe Trump is an anomaly. I think there is definitely a blue wave that's being sustained every time he says something, tweets something. We're seeing a lot more activists. Activists used to be something that was this small group, of people that were very, very motivated, but had trouble, either didn't want to increase their numbers or had trouble increasing their numbers because they were so individual issue motivated.
Yeah. Absolutely.
As we're seeing, everywhere, it's no longer, oh, I care about plastic bags, plastic bags being eradicated. It's the bigger issue of global warming. Yeah. And so activists are being able to kind of come together, and people who weren't even activists before are now seeing things that are affecting their lives, that, are opening their eyes to the larger world that is politics. So in some ways, do I think that that 45 is an anomaly, like I've been saying? But in some ways, there's going to be people that are going to be coming out of different careers that, aren't your typical lawyers. A lot of times, a lot of our legislators, which we do want the people writing our laws to be to have a legal background, but are going to come from different avenues because, like I have, they've taken a different path. And I mean, we have in New Jersey, we have one scientist. We have Andrew Zwicker, who represents.
I've heard of him. Yeah.
He's literally a scientist. And we're not going to fix the problems that we have. Obviously we're in the wake of two devastating massacres within less than a day of each other, by just electing the same people. Yeah. We need to have everyone, we need to have a 360 view. It can't just be this singular view. This is how it works. This is how it's got to be. Because it's just not sustainable. We're reaching the point of unsustainability. We need, and again, I have a favorite, obviously, in the current primary. But
are you willing to tell us who it is?
I am. I have three favorites. I can't say that. So I have the established favorite. I'll go out there and say that I really do like Joe Biden.
Same here.
He's proven that, obviously does he have his shortfalls? Yes. But I think he's proven a certain way to bringing people together. Kamala Harris, I absolutely adore.
Love her.
And I'm saying I like two people that are literally been going at each other's throats. But again, that is part of the process.
Yeah, sure.
And then the third, obviously, kind of dropped him before, but Mayor Pete.
Yeah. He's somebody that like I find intriguing because I think the front runners, like you said right now, are Harris and Biden. But I don't know. There was, especially after the debates, I kind of got a better understanding for who he was as a candidate and saw a lot of strengths on that stage. Like, I mean, you have, 20 candidates split between 2 days. So for me, or how I was thinking about it, is like it was kind of like saturated for people to sit there over 2 nights, and unless you had like a pen and a pad and you were writing down, was really hard for me as a voter to, besides the big guns, to look at the other guys and say like, who is like the dark horse. And he, for some reason, I don't know why, he just kept standing out to me, which was pretty cool because I'm all about the underdog.
Oh, absolutely.
I thought he was pretty, he was up there doing his thing.
Yeah, no, again, we could go spend an hour just talking about him, but a veteran, speaks how many a million languages. He's educated, he's smart, he brings that executive experience. And again, there's a difference between being a mayor and being a senator. Senators have to operate with 99 other people. Mm-hmm. Mayors operate as the sole decider. They have that's an executive experience that I think a lot of people take for granted. But again, his story, his background, and everything else, truly inspiring. As are all the candidates. Yeah,
they all had something that like kind of peaked out, for me. But he was the one that I kind of was like always reverted back to. You know what I mean? Remembered what he said. Just his demeanor, everything. I really kind of was digging what the vibe that he was giving in the midst of all that, because it kind of got chaotic for me a little bit. I personally am digging the whole Biden thing going on, only just because, and it's kind of probably not the way to vote, but just because I think we need someone like him or Harris to spank Trump on his ass and also bring some policy behind it too. I don't think it should just be about getting him out. You know what I mean? Okay, that's fine. But then if that does happen, what are you going to do with the policies for the next 4 to 8 years?
Of course.
But that's a good segue into when I was talking to AJ pre-show, I was, my hopes to have AJ on is to gear us all up to the election in 2020. So we know how to make informed decisions. We know what to look for in candidates. We know how to get out there and help our communities, get behind policies and platforms that we feel that are going to impact us as citizens, not only on the national level, but on a local level. And AJ say, hey, Frankie, you know what? I think the bigger conversation is that we have to start talking about 2019, what's going on right now, because that's just as important as talking about 2020. So AJ, tell me when you kind of wanted to steer the conversation in that direction, what what makes right now 2019 so monumental that you want to have that conversation now about versus then 2020?
So of course, there are multiple parts to this. Obviously, 2019. It's not like you have so many votes and you can't make them. Every year you have a vote. And in some states you have multiple votes.
Yeah.
So you have multiple times to vote. I'm going to use New Jersey. I'm a New Jersey political operative, so I'm going to use New Jersey as an example. But we have May elections, which we worked on, which is called a nonpartisan race, where you're electing generally in larger cities. Where it's not Democrats against Republicans. It's incumbent against runner. Yeah. And in these races, there's a lot of mixing. Obviously Democrats and Republicans are still Democrats and Republicans, but you have it's not party balance. And again, this is what I think we really do need on the local level, because these are not the people who are voting to change gun laws. These are not the people who are voting, on those top of the ticket issues. Yeah. These are people to make sure that your trash is picked up on time, that your potholes are filled, that your lights, that there's more street lights and more stop signs, and that your parks are clean, that your town isn't getting sued by the state for not following through on affordable housing. Yeah. These are the people that impact your lives. So that kind of dovetail that into just local elections in general. Yeah. One funny thing, and I don't think a lot of people realize, is that school board has the lowest turnout of anything. Yeah. I've seen people win school board races by 3 votes, and they got 3 votes. Yeah. And a school board generally controls more of a larger budget than the municipal does. So your mayor and council, your school board spends more money than they do. Wow. So, and we're electing these people by 3 votes. And I don't think people really understand the brevity of that decision. It's school board, who cares? Well, these are the people that are putting in place not just your teachers, your school staff, your school janitors, but they're making budgetary decisions on your recreation programs, your anything that's tied to the schools.
Stuff like curriculum and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. You're upset that your school doesn't have a drama department, and you go to your mayor and council. They have a council member who's the liaison to the school board, but they can't do anything. It's the school board that controls that. Yeah. And I think people forget that. School board races don't happen generally in November. They happen in May or June. And you're seeing cities like Hackensack, where a school board member went after, made homophobic statements about the curriculum, and she's still on the school board.
Yeah, because no one's turning out to get her out of there. So
exactly. And this is just one example, but these local elections really do matter. And kind of dovetailing that back, obviously, to listeners who are not from New Jersey or whatever. There are 3 governor races up in 2019. So that's statewide elections. Kentucky, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Okay. Kentucky has a Republican governor running for re-election. Mississippi has a Republican governor running for re-election, and Louisiana has a one-term Democratic governor running for re-election. So these are, those are, in the state, just like it is nationally. There's 3 prongs. There's your governor, who's your state executive, and then you have 2 houses. Sometimes they're called assembly or state congress, and then your state senate. A control of all 3 is called a trifecta. So because you have control of obviously all 3 legislative areas. Kentucky, and Mississippi right now are Republican trifectas that they're trying to hold back. So they have the legislative races up in Louisiana, Mississippi. Virginia has also what they call a purple state. It's not a fully Republican state, not a fully Democratic state. They have a mixed state house. Gotcha. So they're obviously those elections for those legislative seats are really up, and that's really important because these are, we obviously there's the states' rights and the federal government. These state houses are making decisions on the state level.
Yeah.
New Jersey has their entire assembly. So what would be New Jersey's House of Representatives is up this year.
Okay.
So that is the top, what we call the top of the ticket. So normally that would be filled by a governor, senator, or president. The top of the ticket this year is the assembly.
Gotcha.
Now, this is important because these are generally the lowest turnouts because nobody knows what it's like school board. Nobody knows what the assembly does. But we have county officials and local officials also on the ballot, but with assembly being at the top.
Yes.
And we also have 3 congressional seats up, so I don't want to leave out the congressional seats. We have Pennsylvania the 12th, North Carolina the 3rd, and North Carolina the 9th. Interesting thing about those 3, the 9th is actually a vacant congressional seat because there was so much voter fraud that was found.
I remember that. I remember hearing about that.
That was all over the national news. So we're seeing what could be, and that's historically a Republican seat, what could actually end up turning into a Democratic seat based on how much scrutiny is going to be on that election.
Gotcha.
And kind of springboarding into that scrutiny, we are obviously, if you watch the Mueller report or read anything about the Mueller report, there are serious allegations of outside interference into our elections. Well, 2019 is going to set the standard for what happens in 2020.
Yeah.
So the more people that vote, the more people that do it the right, obviously the more real votes that get counted, we're going to have a better idea of what's going to happen in 2020. If there was interference last year and the year before, like we heard in the Mueller report, and obviously in 2016, there's going to be interference this time. And now we have more eyes on it. So that's why if there's less people coming out to vote, they're not going to see the abnormalities they would if a lot of people came out to vote.
So AJ, you bring up a great point. So with all this interference, I'm sure it's kind of been going on even more so than we're hearing in the news cycle leading up to 2016. I don't think it's something that's fairly like a new thing that's been going on. Maybe it's developed a lot more into this uncontrollable beast that needs to be controlled, and it's getting like the spotlight of what's going on. But how does someone like you, I know you do a lot of the more local stuff, but put yourself into a presidential kind of campaign type of role. How does somebody like yourself, that's an operative, that's looking at the strategy and all that, take account for all of that interference that's going on? Trying to create data and all that kind of stuff on the candidates when you have all of this bullshit that's going on that's tainting all the real data, you know what I mean? That we would have had in previous elections. Now we're seeing that, like you said, real votes versus, voter suppression and all that kind of stuff. So how does somebody like yourself kind of wrap yourself around that?
So that's if I had a great answer to that, I'd be a millionaire. I guess the simple answer is I hate to let everybody in on a huge secret, but your voting history is public record.
Yeah.
So when you vote, you're making it's just like any other governmental thing. There's a note on it. So anyone can see. They can't see who you vote for. No one knows who you vote for. When you vote, you're not signing up for jury duty. That's not how it works. Mm-hmm. But there is a record of it. And a lot of what we do is our empirical stats are from historical references. So we have a lot of things, we call a super voter a 4 out of 4. So a 4 out of 4 voter is someone who voted in the last 4 elections, voted in every single one.
Okay.
Then obviously a 3 out of 3 is a pretty good voter. 2 out of 2 voter is probably someone who only votes in a gubernatorial and a presidential. A 1 out of 4 is probably somebody who only votes in a presidential. So obviously right now we're kind of, this year we're in that 2 and 1s are probably not voting this year. But to kind of counteract and kind of get our brains around what kind of interference can happen, is really, really looking at the data, really looking at who the new registered voters are.
Okay.
And then also looking at if, person A hasn't voted in 16 years, and they decided to vote the first time in 2016, we're going to pull those people. And I want to figure out who those people were. Now, maybe they are just, they were really enthused by Trump. Maybe they were really disgusted by Trump and they just couldn't take it. But again, we want it, like, anyone worth their salt in this game is going to investigate and going to look at those people, either on a get out the vote sort of sense, like, we need this person, they've never vote, we need them to come out to vote, or is someone in some way manipulating that vote. He said, now that's different than voter suppression. We see that a lot in Georgia, where I believe Stacey Abrams should have won. In Florida, where we have these candidates of color who we're hearing all these stories about people saying, they weren't allowed to vote, for whatever reason, or they were pulled off the rolls, and that's a totally different game,
different beast, different animal.
Yeah, there's so many pieces to this puzzle, and that's why it is so important that every door counts.
Yeah.
We saw it on that local election that we bet on.
Yeah.
We were able to to talk to people, have 3 or 4 times to get an idea of who our supporters were. We like to say we have 3 camps. They fucking love us, they fucking hate us, or they're in the middle.
Yeah.
And everybody's going for that in the middle crowd.
Yeah.
And we had so much data, we knew who we were gonna get and who we weren't gonna get. And if that type of organization can be implemented state, countywide, statewide, and nationwide, President Obama did a 50-state strategy. Every state mattered. And while in the end Hillary had 3 million more votes, it wasn't, she lost the, Pennsylvanias, the Michigans, that, maybe didn't feel the love that deserved it. And having a strategy that, where people stand, you are listening to them, you're taking in their concerns, is going to be super important. 2019, 2020, and 2021, because regardless of what the results are in 2020, both sides there's going to be a significant power shift, even if it's the current occupant win. And I hope it doesn't happen, but if he does win a second term, there's going to be a major power shift. He is now given a mandate. And the senators that are up in 2020 and 2021, the Congressional and the House members of Congress who are up in 2020 and 2021 are going to feel that same power shift.
Yeah. And I hope that doesn't happen. But, what I've learned in the last election is you never rest on your laurels. And, in this politics game, I think the landscape has shifted. And when you have an anomaly like Trump that comes out, and, I have to give him, if I don't like to give him credit for fucking nothing, but what I will do is give him credit for shaking the shit out of Washington, D.C., whether it be for bad or for good. I think we were just in this pattern of Republican, Democrat. And now, for what I hope that comes out of this whole thing, if he gets another 4 years, I'll probably fucking kill myself. But if he, I think what needs to happen is that the players who step to the plate and really want to do this and sit in that office, male, female, black, white, whatever. You got to change this shit up. You got to like really, there's one thing the man is genius about is spinning shit to his advantage. He's the Teflon Don. He knows how to work a camera. He knows how to tap into anger and hate.
Fear.
He's done that. Fear. He's done that his whole entire career, way before he was even a politician. I mean, he's taking $80,000 ads out in the, what was it, the New York Times or the Post about the Central Park Five. Like,
yeah.
He knew what he was doing, and it probably really didn't even matter much about his own convictions on it. He knew that he was going to get media attention. He knows how to utilize and manipulate the media, and I don't know if it's his brainchild or whoever is behind his image and marketing, whatever, whoever it is, really knows how to manipulate the media and spin them on their asses. And I hope that this shakes things up a bit for candidates to come at it with a new approach, a different approach. I'm sure that you're a more expert than I am, but I'm sure that there are certain things that are standard. But I just think that, and that's maybe why we're seeing, and there's such a pull towards like candidates like Harris, is that, you have a strong black female candidate out there, and who's a real badass. She stood up to a lot of stuff in Congress in the last 2 years, 3 years, and has really put herself out there. Not agreeing with some of her own caucus, things like that. We need somebody that really is going to change the dynamics of things. He changed it in a negative way, in my opinion, but now we need someone to change it in a different way, in a positive way, that we can see decent policies roll out and see some changes in the way that governments ran. I mean, the baby boomers they're like prehistoric. They're on the verge of extinction. We have a new breed of young, bright minds that are coming up, and I see it. My son is 17. He's been involved in political process a lot throughout things that I've done, not because I want him to see what it's like to be a voter, what it's like to have your this is your forefathers died for you to have this right to go out there and one vote. Yeah, it's one vote, but I don't look at I tell them all the time, it's your vote, and your vote is powerful, and you need to get out there and you need to stand for something. And what do you think, AJ, 2019, 2020, a lot of new voters, someone like my son, who in 2020 is going to be 18 and eligible to vote. So what do you think are some of the issues that these young voters, or these candidates, I should say, who are running in 2020 can appeal to this new demographic of young voters that are going out there, who a lot of them say, I mean, AJ, you and I know, they say, I'm not going to vote, it doesn't matter to me, I'm not, my voice doesn't matter, all that kind of jazz that, we hear. What do you think these candidates, how should they kind of, I hate to use the word target, especially in light of, but how do they go after those young voters to stir an excitement for them to go out and vote?
Well, again, this is, at this point, it sounds like a broken record, but we're a generation that is not going to do as well as their parents. We're seeing students leaving just undergrad with their undergrad degree, $120,000, $180,000 in debt.
Yeah.
the buying power on the traditionals, your cars, your mortgages, are really affected, and not by the current generation. They followed in step. It's the previous generation of not, they were looking out for themselves. And we're seeing students, leave school with ridiculous debt. They're now seeing the effects of climate change. If I know any kid that lives down the shore that was, of remembering age during Sandy.
Yeah.
During, watching, I was on vacation 2 weeks ago, and I saw, 20 miles from me on Cape Cod, which I've gone up every summer, never seen a tornado. There's serious, significant global climate change. And I think that this generation, while, we like to assign apathy to them, I think they're more worldly than, they're seeing more things. There's so much more of a visibility than there was for us growing up. Social media, YouTube, everything, where they can see what's going on in other places a lot more unfiltered. And
in real time. And there's,
of course,
it's the ease, the access to the information is like right at their fingertips. So yeah, like that totally makes.
Yeah, no. And again, you're seeing, the other thing is you have, and again, this is something I wanted to bring up, why 2019 is so important. 2019 is going to affect the census. The people elected in 2019 are going to help create and work on the census. We're going to find out that what everyone expects an American to be, a Caucasian, is changing. It's shifting. There is a silent majority there that I think our younger people are more accepting than previous generations. And I think that's another thing that we're going to see more Harrises, more Mayor Petes. I mean, obviously, without how amazing would that be if we had our first gay president? And that's not even something we discussed in the beginning. But that's things that motivate. When I was in college, gay marriage was a big thing. And I remember arguing with people, why it had to happen. And now, that was 12 years ago. But it's now become the norm. And I think that these social issues that are changing a lot faster, and I think are motivating young people. And climate change is a social issue. If you wonder why there are people at the border, it's because of climate change. We can't, like we said, why we need not just lawyers running for office anymore, because we can't answer the problems that we have the same way. We can't think of our border security as a reason for as terrorism. It's climate change. It's all of these other, people don't have food. Farms aren't growing food anymore. The temperature's rising.
Exactly.
We're losing land masses as polar caps are melting. And I think young people get that. I really do think that young people see that. It's hard though for them to see that their vote for their councilman or their alderman or their school board member matters just as much as who they vote for president.
Yeah,
because,
absolutely.
I live right near Hoboken. We go shopping at the supermarket in Hoboken. You can't get plastic bags anymore. They are not available.
Yeah, Point Pleasant Beach is strictly prohibited. So we have no plastic bags, no plastic straws, no plastic cups. The town pretty much kind of put a kibosh on anything that's plastic. But I think they have more of a shot to do that because you have that younger mindset that understands and knows that there is a real fear out there, and as a parent, that's terrifying for me. Global warming issues and climate change is my son's 17. He has a very long life to live, and I have always been passionate about environmental causes, but it's even more so now because of the fact that I leave a legacy, my son, his children, and I want them to be able to sustain on this planet. And I think it is those type of issues now. And I guess that's what I was kind of going with like the candidates need to kind of tap into those issues. Like I was saying to my son the other day, Matt, you're going into college, so you're going to be voting in 2020. Like, what are some of the things that you would want to vote on? Like, what would you be looking in for a candidate? And he was like, Dad, I really don't, I don't know. And I'm like, well, just like you said, AJ, you're going to college. You're going to be in college for 4 years. By the time you get out of college in those 4 years, that same person that you're voting for is going to probably determine what you are going to have to pay back in your college loans. I said there are candidates out there, and whether people think it's realistic or not, or whatever, that are offering a platform for like waiving the student debt or getting rid of the student debt. So like those are the issues that I try to, when I speak to young people about voting, because I really do. I feel like if we could tap into that demographic, we can. What happened in 2016 can hopefully be narrowed down a bit. The probability of that happening again, because we do need our people of color going out. We do need women vote. We do need the youth to go out and vote. If you get those three pieces, that's going to be a really hard thing to contend with. But it's all about motivating those people. For some reason, they have not been motivated or feel like they've been heard, or candidates coming to their communities and speaking to them that speak about real life, issues. And I guess that's why I like working on a local level, is because, like you said, it's about the stop signs. It's about the garbage. It's about the daily, day-to-day things that impact people. And you can see the passion, whether they vote for the candidate you're campaigning for or not. You can tell, like, I'm not voting for this person because this and this did not happen. I have potholes on my street that never get fixed. My garbage never gets picked up. Parking is crazy. There's you really see the passion that people have for issues. And I think we need to tap into that on the national level. And I think we've kind of lost that. We just expect people to, and I think we're seeing a little shift of it. You see, like, I think now more so than ever in any election, we're hearing more about, like, progressive Democrats and moderate Republicans and all these kind of different levels of party lines. So but to circle back, the young voters are something that I just feel, campaign strategies, and I'm sure that they too, you need to wrap themselves around a little bit. But talk to us about, you mentioned it before, talk about Get a Vote. Tell people what that really means. What is GOTV?
So GOTV is a acronym for, obviously, Get Out the Vote. It strikes fear in everyone who's ever worked on a campaign. Because it's a real combination of what you have done or what you haven't done. If obviously I come at this with a field background, so if you have a campaign that's had a successful field program, you've identified your supporters. You've identified the people that are not going to support you. Like I said, you have your three camps. Fucking love you, fucking hate you, I don't know. Mm-hmm. GOTV is about getting the people who fucking love you to come out to vote.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times, you're talking, if you can talk to 30% of the people you want to speak to. So you have 100. Say the race is there's 300 people in town A, and 100 of them love you, 100 of them hate you, and you're both fighting for that 100 in the middle. Over GOTV, you're probably only going to talk to 40 of them. Of those 100 that love you, you're probably only be able to talk to 40 of them. And it's a game of numbers. Do those people know where their polling location is? It's amazing. I talk to people, all the time. Do you know where your polling location is? It's a weird question. It's a weird opening conversation starter. Hey, do you know where you vote? But they don't know where they vote.
That's scary.
And they're not first-time voters. They go to a polling location. Growing up, I knew where if I lived at my parents' house, I'd still be voting at the same place. And I get it, people move around. Obviously, my polling location's a different place now since I don't live at home anymore at my parents' house. It's crazy the number of people that don't know where they vote. But it's having a conversation. When do you normally vote? Oh, I normally vote before I go to work. Okay, so election day. This year, election day is Tuesday, November 5th. So, and the polls are open from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. And you can vote if there is a line and you were there before 8 p.m., you can vote.
Yeah.
If there's a line and if the doors aren't open at 6 a.m., you can vote. Like, no one can tell you can't vote.
Yeah.
And it's planning, it's having people plan their day around election day. It's interesting that we don't give people off for election day.
Bro, you just read my mind. I was just going to say that. I was just going to say, like, we have off for tons of other holidays. Why would it?
It almost hurts in a sense too, though, because if people had election day off, they wouldn't be home. They'd go away.
Yeah, true.
So it's a catch-22 because
Gotcha.
that
makes sense.
One of my favorite lines is when people talk about Memorial Day, it's not about barbecues, it's about remembering the people who gave the ultimate sacrifice in all of our military engagements. That people probably wouldn't respect election day anymore, and probably would have lower turnout. It doesn't take a long time to vote.
No, it doesn't.
You sign your name.
I mean, I live in a smaller borough than Point Pleasant Beach is not a lot of people that live year round. We get a lot of action because of summer months, but the people who are residents here, there's not a big population. But I even remember living in Newark. And election day, I was in and out.
Yeah.
I was in and out. You're right. It doesn't take long.
There's no excuse. But again, GOTV, and a lot of people, what's your GOTV strategy? Everybody's GOTV strategy is simple. It's getting their people out to vote. Is there some persuasion that goes on while you're talking to, that 100 in town A where there's 300 people and you have 100 unknowns? Yeah, there's still persuasion that goes on there, but it's only if they were like, yeah, I kind of like your candidate. If they're like, obviously it's all about reading people and following your data, but I bet those 100 people that don't know who they're voting for probably don't have a very strong voting history.
Yeah.
And again, it's not rocket science. Having conversations with people and finding out what they care about, it doesn't matter if that town A is 300 people or 3 million people. Identifying who's going to come out to vote. Obviously, leading up to GOTV, it's about finding out what's going on. GOTV is about getting your supporters out. It's two different games. One's a persuasion. Why this is why I should be your elected official. And then GOTV comes around, and it's now let's get my people out to vote. Because unfortunately, election becomes who gets more votes. It's not who had the better message. It does not who does this better. So when comes down to GOTV, that is, it's the campaign in a sense of winning hearts and minds is over. Now it's getting your people out.
Yeah, getting the asses into the polling booth.
Yeah. And it's, and everyone can vote. There's no reason. Tying back to that, every state has a vote by mail. They call it absentee voting, they call it early voting, or vote by mail. But basically, that gets mailed out way in advance, and you can mail your vote and vote weeks before Election Day. So and you can do it from your house. You have to buy a stamp, and you have to send it back. Follow the directions on envelope.
I learned that from working with you in a local election that we did, because I wasn't even thinking about that, until I saw it, how how important that is to take in consideration those people who are doing, write-in voting, and how that can be used for people who don't want to go to the polling booth. Well, if you don't want to go, a couple weeks before
us.
Yeah, mail in your vote if that's what you want to do, and I don't think people know that option, and they use those excuses, the kids, school, work, this and that. But if those are your barriers, there's a way around it, and you still can be part of the democratic process and vote if you work. People who work vote, people who have kids vote, people who are elderly vote, so it's working around those barriers.
You know who else can vote? People who are homeless. Just because you don't have four walls and a roof above your head doesn't mean you can't vote. Every citizen, and depending on their legal status, if they've been convicted of a federal offense, depending statewide, and that state, they can vote. It doesn't matter. So again, it's a little bit harder to track them down. It's a little bit harder of a process for them to get identified. But they have the right to vote as everyone else does. And we often, even in my business, we get caught up on those 404s.
Yeah.
Or if you're an underdog, turning those one of four and two of four voters into your voters, to registering new voters. New Jersey now, you can register at the DMV. You just check off a portion of the application and you're registered to vote. And again, it should be easy to register to vote. It should be easy to vote. It shouldn't be this process that you see all over the place where it's like, oh, it was hard for me to do this. It was, inconvenient for me to fill it out and mail it in. But again, it's a right we have. It's the only check we have against our elected officials to keep them in line. And when you explain that to people, you can't explain it to a large group of people. It's got, it's again a one-on-one conversation. It's people who are, people who are listening to this podcast. Vote. You can't complain if you don't vote. To quote,
absolutely not.
To quote President Obama, don't boo. And again, it's just that.
It's true.
Exactly.
100% true. Well, AJ, I was gonna have us talk about some of the events that are going on today, but I think we can have you come and revisit some of these topics that I was gonna have AJ just talk about the presidential speech that happened today, but I think that we'll put a pin in that for another day, only because, and the beauty of a podcast is we can go on forever, but I don't want the listeners who are listening to this, because guys, we got some really good information from AJ about how important it is. Not only, the hoopla is always about presidential elections, but if you've never voted, if you want to get out there and see what it's like. You're a new voter. You've never voted before. You haven't voted in a while. It's a good thing to get involved in your local elections because it gets you to be comfortable with the process. And that could be something that scares people away. So I would love to talk about some of the meaty stuff that happened, over the weekend in the last news cycle. But I really feel like we gave you guys a lot of information that hopefully you can digest. I'm going to have AJ back periodically to go over some stuff that, not only has to do with voting, but politics in general. So I'm sure we'll definitely have some conversations moving into, going through 2019 to 2020, be able to shoot the shit about some of the stuff that we are hearing in the news cycle, because I think we need a place to process some of this stuff. It's very divisive and very much impacting the fabric of our great nation that we have here. Nations about some of these things like racism and divide and xenophobia and all that shit that we're hearing and spewing on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. We need to kind of keep the conversation going about a lot of this mess that we're seeing. That's a distraction, guys. It's a distraction for you guys not to get out there to vote, to get desensitized about things, so you don't do what AJ says and get out there and vote. They're trying to get you to be so frustrated with the process that you just throw your hands up and say, fuck it, I'm not even gonna wind up voting for this shit show. So AJ, thank you so much, buddy, for coming on. I hope that we can have you back soon, whenever AJ's the busy guy. So whenever we can grab his free time and get him to come on and, give us some information, have a dialogue about issues and topics that are surrounding social justice issues, climate change, all that kind of stuff that we need to look at for our candidates in the next year. We'll have AJ to come back on, and I'm going to give AJ the final words of the day. AJ, what I do with my guests, I tell them, since this is the UNnormalized podcast, give me one thing that you do to keep things unnormalized. So that could be career-wise, that could be fun stuff, recreational. Like, what is something that if we had to open up the dictionary and see UNnormalized and see AJ's face and name next to it, what is something that you feel like kind of keeps you doing some of this stuff that's out of the box and really doing something unique with this thing that we're given called life?
That's awesome. That's a interesting thing. You know what? Like, MSNBC is always on the background, but I'm a huge sports guy. I play hockey like 4 nights a week. And if anyone out there is a sports fan or a hockey fan, I'm a goalie. So it's usually the craziest motherfuckers out there. They're the ones that literally get hit in the face with a puck and ask for more. We're so intellectual, in the day-to-day. It's kind of fun to just put yourself out there and get hit in the face, 20 to 30 times a night. So. And listen, everybody's releases is their own, and AJ is, if you guys had him on like social media, you would see like not only are the badass stuff that he does in like politics and all that kind of stuff, but he's out there with like injuries and all that kind of stuff. He's still hitting the field. He's still playing baseball. He's
he's still out there playing hockey and all that stuff. So those are the things we need to do to keep ourselves kind of living outside of this box that is called, life, and looking for ways to decompress from all the shit that we're ingesting nowadays. But AJ, thanks, buddy, for coming on. That's Unnormalized Podcast for today, and stay tuned next week for another great episode of Unnormalized Podcast.